There is no second best. By becoming rich. Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Need to get better at that transition, but we're working on it. So, Friday, 21st of June. And so I think we're close to a local bottom. And Bitcoin has just broken this morning, or is starting to break lower, which confirms to me that this market is going to be probably weeks away from any kind of upside movement. Something like that, very roughly. Right? Whether it's a sideways action, whether it has a bounce up and back down, whether it dips a bit lower. I just think that that's going to be chop, and the markets are going to return to their state, or continue in their state of efficiency. And I said in trading chat, I was chatting a bit this morning. So first thing, confirming a short-term approach. I'll talk about that in a second. I want to be very clear. You're not supposed to trade the way I trade if you're a different style of trader. So preface that. And then I was talking in the chats about efficient markets and inefficient markets. And an efficient market is one in which the news is priced in. There's generally not a major catalyst, and price tends to move directionally the way you would expect. So this market is moving efficiently, even though it's going down. It's efficient because it's in a downtrend, and it's in a steady downtrend, pretty much higher highs, higher lows as you would expect, oscillating around those bands, lower and lower and lower, because there's an imbalance of supply. Sellers are selling, and they have been selling and overwhelming all the way since 72. That will eventually reach a point at which the sellers no longer want to sell, because it's good to sell at 72, it's good to sell at 70, it's good to sell at 68. It's probably not so good to sell at 62 or 61 or 60. And that's how you'll see price stopping. Our price eventually will stop, and that's when it will start to do that. First of all, the sellers just won't want to keep selling in that manner. Now, whether it then goes in the opposite direction right away, or even just goes lower after a brief pause, is unknown. But the selling will stop pretty soon. However, the way the market moves for alts, right, and this is like let's look at total 3. The efficient state for altcoins is actually to go down, not up. Reason being is that when the market is tending towards efficiency, altcoins will bleed, because altcoins have a supply overhang. And I should really look at individual alts. This isn't true of every single alt, but it is true of most, especially the newer ones. Like, say, new launch, insiders dumping, hedging locked tokens, selling OTC. Whenever crypto doesn't have bull market hype, the tendency for all these alts is just going to go lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And Bitcoin can go sideways and the alt will go lower because of the supply overhang. Many of these, if you just go and look at token unlocks, there's just too many tokens, right? So next 7 days, there's 75 million of cliff unlocks. There's 51 million of linear unlocks every single day. And when you look at the next, let's see if we've got the next 30 days. Does it allow it? No. As you look through them, you can see the millions and millions and millions and millions of tokens that are being emitted all the time. Like WorldCoin is another good example. WorldCoin is just getting inflated out of existence. There's absolutely no demand here. Nowhere near enough demand to meet the supply coming onto the market every day. And because a lot of that is by investors who are in profit regardless, let's say for WorldCoin, a lot of its emissions to do with their fucking orbs and all that. But we'll take a coin that has, investor unlocks currently, like ARB. Arbitrum had its first big unlock in March, It was the 16th of March, and I mentioned to you guys, is our unlocks going to be bullish this cycle? Nope. Categorically proven. No bullish unlocks. Believe it or not, last cycle, Solana's big unlock and a few others actually were the kickstart of the bull market. Huge difference now, though, is because when Solana did it, it was worth 100 million market cap. These coins are doing it at multi-billions. And the investors in ARB, the early investors, some of them may still already, even now, be in profit. Right? They could have a cost base of 50 cents. So even here they can sell. You might think, who can sell there? Like, no one's left to sell. There's always somebody left to sell. So with that, and having done the altcoin request stream yesterday, and seeing where pretty much the whole altcoin market is, when you put on the bands and you just look at them here, and you look at ARB, and you just look at Total 3, and you look at the whole market, I see it as being close to a bounce. Sure, there can be a bounce soon, but I don't see it as being close to anywhere near a bottom. Right? I don't see that as being likely, and I see it just rolling over. And best case scenario, we're maybe 6 weeks away from any kind of actual move. And obviously the risk is that it just keeps bleeding down first, and then it does that, and then we go from there. So back to my point from trading analysis. For me, I don't see a compelling reason now to hold alts outside of just my core bags. I want to have more of a short-term approach, and I did this last bull as well. The trigger for me to adopt more of a short-term approach is usually Bitcoin hitting all-time high. And obviously Bitcoin did hit all-time high, but unlike last cycle, it was much earlier this time when we didn't get a big breakout. But the price action since has shown that there is no rewards for me in holding alts for like multi-months. Better to just trade them when I believe there is a short-term move coming. So if you want to take it really simple, if you take something like Apu, instead of holding it for just, I'm going to hold it for the cycle, I would say no, I'm going to just swing trade it for 3 weeks whenever I see an opportunity. And the difference between now and the start of the bull, or the earlier phase, as if you guys who were here, throughout 2022, end of 2022 after FTX, into 2023, all of this time, it was buy and hold. Just accumulate, bought a cash in June, was buying Bitcoin all year, just accumulate, just buy. And even though the market was bleeding and just sideways for alts, it was at a different phase because the bottom was in, which we knew based on Bitcoin. The altcoin bottom might not have been in exactly, but at this point, buy and hold outperforms because you don't know when it's going to have that explosion. And when it does, you have an easy ride as new money comes in. Now, that's not the case because in theory, everything could bleed all the way back to here and then start again. Right? That's probably not the most likely, but it's also very, very possible. Again, I don't think that will happen, but it could. And Bitcoin will not be affected. ETH will not be affected in terms of the worst of it because they will be the strongest. I'm still of the opinion this is a bull market. I still think portfolio should be denominated in crypto, not in cash. I wouldn't go 100% cash because then you have to try and time every single move, and that is generally not a good approach in a bull. So I'll be over the next few days probably just going back to a fully Bitcoin and ETH portfolio. I think 50-50 initially, because ETH hasn't quite flipped those bands to green yet. I think it will. I think the ETH ETF coming is going to be a catalyst for ETH. But I also think timing-wise, the ETF's probably coming at the wrong time if we continue to have chop during the summer months. I still think there's more bullish than bearish ahead of us, but I don't think it extends into altcoins. And I don't think that just holding alts, for me, makes as much sense as just trading them. And that becomes more clear and more apparent as we go further into the bull, the later stages of the bull. So if you're not, and then this will be really clear, and I don't want a million fucking questions about what about a Cash, what about Bowden, what about a Poo. You should trade your own plan, position trades. If you're holding something because you're busy and you're not active in the market every single day, and you just want to know that one day when you wake up and everything's pumped that your bags are packed, then just keep holding your coins. That's not me though. I'm a shorter term trader and I'm here every minute of every day. And I still have all those coins on my radar, but I'm not seeing, on lower time frames, I'm not seeing signs that they're going to hold or be good holds in the next month, let's call it. Bowden had a complete failure at the attempt to reverse yesterday, so I'll be swapping that back into Bitcoin. And the difference of this is it might very well be bottoming right now, but on lower time frames it's not showing anything as of yet. And if it does and there's an opportunity to trade it, I'll trade it, which might be just a trade like that, or just leave it. But I don't see a reason to hold, same as the Trump one. So Trump's back to where I bought it, well actually slightly above. I bought it around here on that first time, or that after that first wave up. Apu, I don't have much Apu. I sold most of it up here, if you remember, or where was it? I can't remember. Sold most of it over here, and I think this path's pretty much predetermined now. It's just going to bleed, and these coins just are, to me, are not going to have any demand anytime soon. And so I don't see any reason to keep holding them. This is the last, let's say this week, and especially the last couple of days, have been the ultimate confirmation that most of these are months away from being bullish rather than days or even weeks. And the attempt there, you see the rejection back down. These moves, obviously Bowden just continuing to make new daily lows, and Trump, retracing the entire thing. And then just the whole market being in a position where, like, Pepe is just rolling over and bleeding. And I mean, anything else, whiff. Like, I think there's a very real chance that whiff could still follow this path of the rally, but there's also a very real chance that whiff can go all the way back to $1 or below. And you might say, oh no, you're too bearish, and everyone on Twitter is like, oh, it can't happen, and bottom's in, people are calling for lower. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, I think it'll go down like this, and then I think it'll rally, and everyone will get excited again, but then it probably just forms a sideways, and then drifts lower anyway. Because that's exactly what basically every coin has done, in terms of it comes back to the origin of its rally, reaccumulates there, and then we go again. So I want to be really clear, I don't know any of this is going to happen, but when I weigh the probabilities up now with how the structure's looking on the charts, the next few months don't look good for alts. To me, probably 1, 2, 3 months of either quiet sort of sideways moves or continued downside. And the market itself is oversold on all time frames. Sentiment is bad. I think we're near a bottom, right? So this is where it's like, you have to be clear. I think the market is near a bottom, but I think that Bitcoin and ETH are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of that when it happens. And the downside risk remains high for alts, from a just bleeding perspective. They just keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And the upside is that when it starts to run again, and it might start pumping again next week, like I think ETH sets up pretty nicely. I think Bitcoin sets up pretty nicely. Probably maybe Bitcoin has to go to 62. I know the German government are selling. When the fuck are they, if they're genuinely dumping 3 billion worth, it's going to be hard for the market to absorb that. ETFs, what were they doing yesterday? How much did they flowed in? More outflows yesterday, right? So you're not in a good position short term for that. ETH is trying to flip this, but maybe this is just a bearish, right? You move up, consolidate, impulse, consolidate until the bands flip green. This is a downtrend on the daily. And so I see more risks in terms of opportunity cost, and I feel more looking back on my journal. This is basically what I've been doing. Looking back on my journals from 2021 at this exact phase of the market, like when prices were doing this, whenever Bitcoin was behaving a certain way and when altcoins were behaving a certain way, the direct effect was further bleed in alts for at least 2 months and Bitcoin or ETH to lead us out of the bearish phase and back into bullish. So if I continue to hold the alts, I'm more likely to underperform. And when it does start to perform again, it's more likely to be Bitcoin which does. And I can always short-term trade the alts in between. So that's going to be my approach. With a cash, I look at it and think, again, I think this is close to a bottom. If you're holding it for a longer term view, fine. Do your own thing. Like I said, have your own plan. Do I think a cash is more likely to hold at this level and rally up? I absolutely do. It's not, if you're selling everything going into cash, that's different than swapping back into BTC, right? I just think that Bitcoin and ETH are going to be the only thing that will attract flows over the summer. It will be the only thing that will attract attention. And AKT is overdue a bounce here, but weekly bands have finally gone red against Bitcoin. And so yes, I'm aware of an opportunity for a bounce, but I do think that this week has confirmed the first major structural break on AKT versus Bitcoin. And so for the rest of the bull, I'll be much more short-term focused. I'm just trying to take trades. And what that means is, like, say for example, I don't know, Phantom is one I remember trading last cycle. Phantom and AVAX. Any of you that were around at the time will remember this. So when I talk about like the short-term trading aspect of this, it's like we're probably somewhere like here or here on alts, and so we're at or near the bottom, but it continues to bleed, and then even this, like, I don't really even want to buy there, but once the momentum starts to pick up, this is where you want to be. Like, the main bulk of the Phantom move is actually that, right? And it's just in terms of waiting for the opportunities to present where the market is going up again, and then trading that. Like, this is broken down, but it's not going to V-reverse straight back up. It seems like it's far too early for any of that to take place just yet. Local lows, yes. Will it rally up? Yes. Will it feel like, oh, this is actually the bottom? Sure. And then it'll feel the inefficiency and it'll go back. It'll do that, and it'll do that, and it'll do that, and then eventually it'll rise up. And to me, this is the most likely path, which means that alts are just not the best thing to hold for the next few months. And if that changes, to me it's quite simple. There's a few things to where you want to just be broadly risk on everything. Bitcoin getting back above its bands, right? So Bitcoin bands going green is when I start looking at getting heavier into alts. ETH bands green, same thing. ETH BTC I've already covered. Solana is the weakest, and I think this will continue. By the way, I think Solana's cooked. I think ETH is a much better play, but look at the bands, no strength. And then just any altcoin, right? Any altcoin that you're looking at is the same, even a cash. If I want to get back into a cash from a trading perspective, then I'll wait for the bands to get reclaimed, right? So that's my view. Not bearish on the market, because otherwise I would be selling into cash. But I think that going back into predominantly majors is a better approach here. And then we'll see how it forms as prices start to bottom out and consolidate. If you remember, like, take a, I don't know, whatever altcoin you want to look at. I don't know. Let's just pick a random one. AVAX. Remember that the market actually does give you plenty of time. Bitcoin, fake news move, and then Bitcoin's big breakout were here. That was AVAX, when Bitcoin was absolutely already pumping. Like, Bitcoin had been trending up from 25 and was already at 35 by this point. Bitcoin did all of this from this low to this high, all while AVAX was here to here, right? And that's going to be most likely what happens for many of these alts. The next time Bitcoin breaks out and ETH breaks out, they're probably going to lead. That will be the signal for alts to start accumulating or bottoming out. And then you start to look at the altcoin outperformance. So while I think there can be more downside, as obviously Bitcoin just keeps bleeding. And if that's going to happen, I'd rather be holding Bitcoin than anything. So that's my approach. You can consider now that I'm 100% BTC until I say otherwise. About ETH, I'm uncertain. I think I'll probably go 75-25. I'll revisit my notes from last year or last cycle to decide what to do. Because with ETH, obviously the ETF's coming up, but I think a lot of people right now are hoping the ETF is like what saves them, rather than actually thinking through it and saying, well, what happens if the market's bearish, which it currently is? What happens if the market's bearish and the ETF launches? Is there more likely to be ETH massive inflows? So just think about it today. The last 2 weeks, Bitcoin has had massive outflows. If the ETH ETF launched today, why would there be inflows? Wall Street currently are not bullish. And it's a very short-term thing because a lot of it's short-term driven funds. But Wall Street currently are dumping their Bitcoin and outflows. And we know why that is because of funding rate. It's not profitable to play the basis trade right now. So the short-term funds are dumping. And there's clearly no long-term spot demand at the moment, right? There's no committed buyers coming in to buy the other ones. That allocation's already happened. And the flows tend to be reflexive. So my expectation here would be, if ETH ETF launches, and I think this is going to reflect in the price, if ETH ETF launches today, it would see outflows. GBTC would be selling, ETH E, which is Grayscale. The Grayscale ETH would be selling, and there wouldn't be any Wall Street interest because there is none for Bitcoin. Then, once the fear passes and we bottom out and we do all that and the sentiment goes back to bullish, which it will, you'll see inflows and it will drive ETH higher. But that could be August. Unless Bitcoin becomes bullish again. But it's just lost 64k this morning. Maybe it reclaims it, but I think it's still in a process of bottoming, which will take a while. You've got the German government selling, etc. So for me, with my portfolio, I'll just be going back to BTC only as a protective measure. I don't see this as being optimal conditions for a high beta altcoin risk, and we'll re-enter those positions whenever the time is right. I also don't think that, even like the Biden or Trump presidential debate trades, I don't think they're going to happen. Like the debates will happen, but I don't see the trade as setting up unless it's going to be very, very, very close to it. I think that the overall market conditions are just bad and those coins might do nothing. If anything changes, I'll day trade it, I'll short-term trade it. But in between now and then, and until then, I think that going back to majors is the best approach. So that's what I'll be doing. If you want to, you should focus your own way, right? If you're holding something, you have to know why you're holding it. You have to have your own views. You should know by now, maybe you're new, or if not, you should know by now, I can literally wake up tomorrow and be long a bunch of other stuff. I will change my mind very quickly based on short-term changes in price action and my systems. But if you're not doing that, you have to have a different approach. This campus is not copy what Michael does. That's not what this campus is about. It's about learning how to trade for yourself. If you like a coin because I mentioned it, form your own thesis, your own idea, your own plan. Akash is a good example here. Like, I bought Akash in June of last year at 55 cents. My view of Akash is entirely different to somebody who comes in and buys it at $5. We're not trading the same coin, right? It's completely different. So you can only do your own, you can only live and die by your own decisions in this market. And make sure that you have that, you have your higher time frame systems and ideas in mind. As I see ETH having a nice reaction. That low was definitely some overly aggressive selling. I had an alert set here from overnight at this level saying long potential. I was expecting consolidation here, a smaller sweep, and then a push up into this gap in efficiency. So I'll double check that on trade of the day. BTC. BTC same. It doesn't seem to want to spend much time below 64, which is good. Like a pretty quick reaction. Bitcoin is weaker, and I think it's going to get... The problem with BTC is it's going to have that overhang if the Germans are selling, and just in general there's too much net selling. But there is a potential here that 64 is holding, and that this was the last sort of capitulation on the lower time frames, and then we start to build back up and go for that monthly open level, and then it probably forms a range around there. That would be like, if Bitcoin's going to start going sideways instead of down, that would be like my expectation for the move. And I'll talk about that one more on trade of the day. But so my view for the next few weeks is that I think Bitcoin and ETH will outperform, because if we're going to see any significant upside, it's going to be them. Altcoins can absolutely rally. Some of them will rally hard. Some of them will even double. Like, it wouldn't take much for Bowden to do a 2x. But it also means I'm not going to continue holding it just endlessly. And we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So that's it. GM, GM, GM.